Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet the fat old pig we've been forced to put up with all evening. I'm standing there in my emerald green dress, the one that cost $2,800, the one Sophia's mother said was appropriate for the Drake Hotel, and I'm watching my new daughter-in-law point at me with her champagne glass while her entire family laughs. Not polite chuckles. Real laughter. The kind that comes from the belly, from genuine amusement at someone else's humiliation. And you know what the worst part is? My son, my baby boy, the child I raised alone for 19 years after his father died, is sitting right there at the head table, close enough to hear every word, and he's looking down at his plate like if he stares hard enough, he can pretend this isn't happening. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up 6 hours to when I still thought this was going to be the happiest day of my life. That morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. in my house in Evanston, the same house I'd lived in for 28 years, the same house where I raised Bradley alone after Robert died, the same house I'd taken out a second mortgage on to pay for Bradley's college when the scholarships didn't cover everything. I made coffee in my kitchen, the one with the countertops I'd been meaning to replace for 10 years, but never had the money for, and I thought about my husband. Robert had been dead for 19 years, but I still missed him every single day, especially on days like this. Our boy's getting married today, I whispered to his photograph on the refrigerator, the one from our wedding day, both of us so young and hopeful and broke. I wish you were here to see it. But Robert wasn't here. Robert had died of a heart attack at 43, leaving me with a 12-year-old son and enough life insurance to bury him and not much else. So I'd done it alone. All of it. The parent-teacher conferences, the emergency room visits, the college applications, the heartbreaks, the victories, everything. Just me and Bradley against the world. And today I was giving him away to Sophia Harrison. The Harrisons. God, where do I even start with the Harrisons? Sophia's father, James Harrison, owned Harrison Industries, one of the biggest commercial real estate companies in Chicago, not just a few buildings. We're talking prime downtown properties worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Her mother, Patricia, didn't need to work, spent her days on charity boards and planning parties that cost more than most people make in a year. They lived in a mansion in Kenilworth. Sophia had grown up with a trust fund, private schools, summers in Europe. She'd never worried about money a day in her life. And somehow my Bradley, sweet, ordinary Bradley with his middle-class upbringing and his public school education, had won her heart. I should have been happy about that. I was happy about that. But there was this tiny voice in the back of my head that kept whispering, "They're going to hurt him. People like that always hurt people like us." I pushed that voice away and got dressed in my emerald green dress. The expensive one. The one I'd bought specifically because Patricia Harrison had gently suggested that my first choice was perhaps too casual for a Drake Hotel wedding. I'd spent $2,800 on this dress. $2,800. You know how long it took me to save $2,800. You know how many extra shifts I worked, how many dinners I skipped, how many times I talked myself out of buying new shoes because I needed to look appropriate for my son's wedding. But I did it. Because that's what mothers do. We sacrifice, we make it work. We show up looking like we belong, even when we know we don't. The ceremony was at 2 o'clock at 4th Presbyterian Church downtown. Beautiful historic building, soaring ceilings, stained glass windows that caught the afternoon light and made everything glow. I sat in the front pew on the groom's side, just me and Robert's elderly Aunt Martha, who was 92 and kept asking when the show was starting. The bride's side was packed. Extended family, family friends, business associates, society people. At least 200 guests, all dressed in clothes that cost more than my monthly mortgage. When the music started, and Sophia walked down the aisle on her father's arm, I had to admit she looked beautiful. Her dress was stunning, $15,000 worth of Italian lace and silk. I knew because I'd been there when she picked it out, sitting quietly in the corner of the bridal boutique, while Patricia and Sophia's sister debated the merits of different designers. Nobody had asked my opinion. But I'd smiled and nodded and written the check when they'd casually mentioned that traditionally, the groom's family contributes to the wedding dress. $15,000 for a dress she'd wear once, But I wrote the check because that's what you do when you love your child. Bradley was waiting at the altar in his tuxedo, and when he saw Sophia, his whole face lit up. That smile, that was Robert's smile. The same joy, the same hope, the same absolute certainty that everything was going to be perfect. My heart broke a little watching him, because I knew what life does to that kind of hope. I knew what it feels like when the person you love dies and leaves you alone with bills you can't pay and a future you never planned for, but I pushed those thoughts away and watched my son get married. Do you, Bradley James Harrison, take Sophia Elizabeth Harrison to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. His voice was strong, certain. Do you, Sophia Elizabeth Harrison, take Bradley James Harrison to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. She was crying, happy tears streaming down her face. And then they were married, and everyone was clapping, and I was crying too. Because despite everything, despite my fears and my doubts and that little voice that wouldn't shut up, my son looked happy. That's all I'd ever wanted, for Bradley to be happy. The reception started at 6 o'clock in the Drake Hotel's grand ballroom, and let me tell you, it was grand. Crystal chandeliers, white roses everywhere, tables draped in ivory silk, a full orchestra playing, champagne fountains, a cake that was taller than I am. Every detail was perfect. Every moment was elegant. Every single thing screamed money. And I had paid for all of it. $312,000. That's what this wedding cost. $312,000. Let me put that in perspective for you. I make $68,000 a year as an executive assistant at a law firm. I've been there for 15 years. Before that, I worked as a secretary, a receptionist, whatever I could find that paid enough to keep us afloat. $312,000 was more than 4 years of my salary, before taxes. Mom, I know it's a lot, Bradley had said when we first talked about the wedding 6 months ago. But Sophia's family has certain expectations. Her sister's wedding was at the Drake. Her cousin's wedding was at the Peninsula. I just want to give her the wedding she deserves. What about what you deserve? I'd asked. Bradley, this is insane. You could buy a house for this much money. We'll buy a house later. Right now, I need to do this right. I need her family to respect me. And there it was. The real reason. Not because Sophia needed a $300,000 wedding, but because Bradley needed to prove he was good enough for her. I'd looked at my son. This man I'd raised to be kind and honest and humble, and I'd seen someone I didn't quite recognize. Someone who thought love had a price tag, someone who believed he needed to buy his way into a family that should have welcomed him with open arms. How much do you need? I'd asked, even though I already knew the answer. Everything. Mom, I need everything. The venue alone is $85,000. The flowers are $40,000. The band is $25,000. The photographer is $18,000. The cake is $12,000. And that's before we even talk about the dress or the food or the... I'll take care of it, I'd said, because what else could I say? This was my son, my only child, the person I'd sacrificed everything for, so I'd emptied my retirement account, all of it. Every penny I'd been saving for the past 20 years, thinking maybe someday I could retire, maybe travel, maybe finally fix those kitchen countertops. Gone, all of it. For one day. For one perfect, elegant, expensive day that would prove my son was good enough to marry into the Harrison family. At the reception, I was seated at table 12. Not at the family table. Not with the wedding party. Table 12 in the back corner with Aunt Martha, who was confused about why we were at a fancy restaurant, and some of Bradley's college friends I'd never met. The family table, table 1, right in front, was for the Harrisons. James and Patricia, Sophia's sister Victoria and her husband Andrew, Sophia's brother Jonathan and his fiancée, Patricia's sister, James's brother. All the important people. I watched them from table 12, laughing and toasting and celebrating like they'd paid for this whole thing themselves. And maybe that was the moment I started to get angry, really angry. Not the quiet, swallow-it-down anger I'd been carrying for months, but the kind of anger that burns, because I'd paid for their daughter's dress. I'd paid for the flowers they were admiring. I'd paid for the champagne they were drinking. I'd paid for the orchestra playing their favorite songs. I'd paid for every single detail of this perfect evening, and I was sitting at table 12. The speeches started around 8 o'clock. James Harrison stood up first, microphone in hand, beaming with pride. "My beautiful daughter Sophia," he began, his voice choked with emotion. "Today, you've married a wonderful young man, and your mother and I couldn't be happier. We've watched you grow from a little girl into this stunning woman, and we're so proud of the life you're building." Everyone applauded. Sophia was crying again, happy tears. James continued, "Now, we know that marriage isn't always easy. But when you find the right person, someone who shares your values, your background, your vision for the future, it makes all the difference. And Bradley, we're thrilled to welcome you into our family." More applause. Bradley stood up and hugged his new father-in-law. I sat at table 12, wondering if James Harrison even remembered that I existed, that I was the mother of the groom, that I'd paid for this microphone he was speaking into. But the speech that really got me was Patricia's. She stood up, elegant in her champagne-colored gown that probably cost more than my car, and smiled at the crowd. "I just want to say a few words about what it means to marry into a family," she said, her voice warm and cultured. When Sophia told us she was dating Bradley, we were naturally curious about his background. And while he comes from different circumstances, we've grown to appreciate his determination and his work ethic. Different circumstances, that's what she called it. My son's childhood, his middle-class upbringing, the fact that his mother worked for a living, different circumstances. "We're confident that with our guidance and support," Patricia continued, "Bradley will grow into the kind of man who can provide Sophia with the lifestyle she deserves. And we're committed to helping them build their future together." She raised her glass. "To Sophia and Bradley, may they always remember where they come from and where they're going." Everyone drank. Everyone clapped, and I sat at table 12 feeling smaller and smaller with every word, because I knew what Patricia meant. I knew exactly what she meant. Bradley came from nothing, and the Harrisons were going to fix that. They were going to mold him into one of them. And his embarrassing middle-class mother with her different circumstances could just stay at table 12 where she belonged. Around 9 o'clock, I went to the ladies' room. I needed a minute. Just 1 minute to collect myself, to remember why I was here, to push down the anger and the hurt and the growing certainty that I'd made a terrible mistake. When I came back, I could hear voices from the hallway leading to the ballroom. Loud voices, laughing voices. I stopped, recognizing the speakers. It was table 1, the Harrison family table, and they were talking about me. "Honestly can't believe Bradley didn't warn us," Patricia was saying. "I mean, did you see her dress? She's trying so hard, but there's only so much you can do with that." Laughter, multiple people laughing. "And her hair." That was Victoria, Sophia's sister, who told her that hairstyle was appropriate. "She looks like she's going to a high school reunion, not a wedding at the Drake." More laughter. "Well, what do you expect?" James's voice now. "Bradley's father died when he was young, and his mother's been working some secretarial job for years. She probably doesn't know how to dress for events like this." "Still," Patricia again, "you'd think she'd at least try to lose some weight before the wedding. I mean, we're going to have to look at these photos forever." My hands were shaking. I stood frozen in the hallway, listening to my son's new family tear me apart. "Should we say something to Bradley?" Victoria asked. "About managing expectations with his mother, making sure she understands how things work in our family." "God, no," Sophia's voice, my new daughter-in-law. "I already had that conversation with him, told him his mother is sweet but a bit much, too involved, too eager to please. He agreed to set some boundaries after the honeymoon." "Good," Patricia said. "The last thing we need is her showing up at family events expecting to be included. She's Bradley's mother, not family." I should have walked away. I should have gone back to the ballroom, sat down at table 12, and gotten through the rest of the night with my dignity intact. But I didn't. I kept listening. "Well, we should get back," James said. "But seriously, Sophia, you need to have a talk with Bradley about managing his mother. Set clear boundaries, make sure she understands her place." "Oh, don't worry," Sophia said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I've got it handled. By this time next year, she'll barely be in our lives." They walked back toward the ballroom, still laughing, still talking about me like I was some problem to be managed. And that's when something inside me cracked. Not broke, cracked, like ice splitting under pressure. Because I'd spent 6 months emptying my retirement account to pay for their daughter's wedding. I'd smiled through their condescension and their gentle suggestions, and their pointed comments about my clothes and my hair and my job. I'd sat quietly at table 12 while they gave speeches about how generous they were to welcome my son into their family, and they thought I was the one who needed to understand my place. I walked back into the ballroom, straight to table 1, where the Harrison family was settling back into their seats, still smiling from their little conversation. "Excuse me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Patricia, could I borrow you for a moment? Just a quick word." She looked surprised but stood up. "Of course, dear." We walked to a quiet corner of the ballroom, and I looked her right in the eye. "I heard you," I said simply. "In the hallway, I heard everything you said about me." Patricia's face went white, then red, then white again. "Margaret, it was just wedding stress, you have to understand." "Do I?" I kept my voice calm, quiet. "Do I have to understand why you and your family spent the last 10 minutes discussing my weight, my hair, my job, and how to push me out of my son's life?" "We didn't mean—" "Yes, you did. You meant every word." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "And you know what? I think it's time we had an honest conversation about who exactly you've been insulting." Before Patricia could respond, Sophia appeared at her mother's elbow. "Is everything okay?" She looked between us, sensing tension. "Everything's fine," Patricia said quickly. "Margaret and I were just—" "Your mother was just telling me about the conversation you all had in the hallway," I said, looking at Sophia. "The one where you called me too involved and a bit much and discussed how to minimize my presence in Bradley's life." Sophia's face went pale. That's not, you're misunderstanding." "Am I?" I looked at both of them. "Because it sounded pretty clear to me. You think I'm an embarrassment. You think I don't belong in your world. You think I need to understand my place." By now, people at nearby tables were starting to notice. The music was still playing, but conversations were dying down. Heads were turning. "Mrs. Harrison, please," Sophia whispered urgently. "Let's discuss this privately." "Why?" My voice was getting louder now. I couldn't help it. "You didn't have any problem discussing me publicly in that hallway. Why should I be quiet about it now?" James Harrison appeared, looking alarmed. "What's going on here?" "Your daughter and your wife were just explaining to me how I need to understand my place," I said clearly. "How I'm not really family. How I'm just Bradley's mother, and after the honeymoon, I'll barely be in their lives." More heads turning, more conversations stopping. The orchestra was still playing, but people were definitely watching now. "Margaret, this is neither the time nor the place," James started. "Really? Because it was the perfect time and place for your family to discuss my weight and my hair and my clothes, for your daughter to plan how to push me out of my son's life. That was appropriate dinner conversation." Bradley was making his way over now, looking panicked. "Mom, what's happening?" "Your wife and her family were just explaining how embarrassing I am," I said, looking at my son. "How I'm too involved, how they need to set boundaries to keep me away from you." "That's not," Sophia started. "I heard you," I said firmly. "All of you, in the hallway, every word." The ballroom had gone quiet now. Even the orchestra had stopped playing. 200 guests were watching this unfold, and that's when Sophia said it. She was flustered, embarrassed, angry at being caught, and she made a choice in that moment. Instead of apologizing, instead of admitting what they'd said, she decided to go on offense. She turned to face the room, raising her champagne glass, and said in a voice that carried across the silent ballroom, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet the fat old pig we've been forced to put up with all evening." She pointed at me, and she smiled. And her family, her parents, her sister, her brother, they laughed. They actually laughed. The sound of it echoed across the ballroom. Cruel, dismissive laughter that said exactly what they thought of me. And Bradley, my son, my baby, the child I'd raised alone and sacrificed everything for, stood there frozen. He didn't defend me. He didn't say a word. He just looked at the floor like he could disappear into it. The silence after the laughter died was deafening. I stood there in my $2,800 dress, feeling 200 pairs of eyes on me, feeling the weight of every sacrifice I'd made, every penny I'd saved, every hope I'd had for this day. And something in me shifted, not cracked this time, shifted, like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place, because I realized in that moment that I'd been playing the wrong game. I'd been trying to earn their respect by being humble, by being generous, by staying in my place. I'd thought if I just gave enough, sacrificed enough, stayed quiet enough, they'd eventually see my value. but they would never see my value because they'd already decided I had none. So I stopped trying to earn their respect, and I showed them why they should have given it freely. I didn't say anything right away. I just looked at Sophia, really looked at her, this 28-year-old woman who just called me a pig in front of 200 people. Then I looked at her father, and I smiled. "James," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom, "I don't think you've met me properly. Let me introduce myself." James Harrison looked confused. "Margaret, I know who you are. You're Bradley's mother." "I'm Margaret Harrison," I interrupted. "Majority shareholder and CEO-elect of Harrison Industries, as of last week's board vote. My first official day is Monday morning." The silence got even deeper. If silence could have a sound, it would have been the sound of 200 people holding their breath. James's face went from confused to shocked to absolutely white. "What?" he whispered. "Harrison Industries," I repeated clearly. "The company your family has been managing for 60 years. I own 51% of it, and starting Monday, I'm your new boss." Sophia's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. "That's impossible," James said. "Harrison Industries has been in my family." "Your family owned 51%, I corrected. "My late husband's family owned 49%. When Robert died, those shares passed to me, and over the last 15 years, I've been very quietly purchasing additional shares whenever they became available. 3 weeks ago, I acquired the final 3% I needed from your cousin in Arizona." I pulled out my phone and pulled up the documentation I always kept handy. Board resolutions, stock certificates, legal confirmation. I now own 51% of Harrison Industries, which makes me the majority shareholder. And last Monday, the board voted me in as CEO. My first official day is tomorrow, Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. James grabbed the phone with shaking hands, scrolling through the documents. His face went from white to gray. You can't." "I can, and I did." I took my phone back. "So when you and your family were in that hallway discussing how to push me out of Bradley's life, when your daughter just called me a fat old pig in front of 200 witnesses, you were insulting the woman who now controls your family's primary source of income." Patricia made a choking sound. Victoria grabbed her mother's arm like she might faint, and Sophia, beautiful, confident, cruel Sophia, looked like she might be sick. "Mrs. Harrison," James started, his voice shaking. "Margaret, please, there's been a terrible misunderstanding." "Has there? Because I'm standing here in a dress I bought specifically because your wife said my first choice wasn't appropriate, at a wedding I paid for." Every single detail. The venue, the flowers, the band, the cake, the dress your daughter is wearing, all of it. $312,000. I let that number hang in the air. $312,000, I repeated. "Which is more than 4 years of the salary you thought was so embarrassingly low. The secretarial job you were mocking. I'm an executive assistant at Chicago's third largest law firm. I make $68,000 a year. And I emptied my entire retirement account to pay for this wedding, to give my son the wedding his new family expected, to prove that even though we come from different circumstances, we deserve to be here." Tears were streaming down my face now, but I didn't wipe them away. "And your family repaid that by calling me a pig." "Mom," Bradley's voice was barely a whisper. I looked at my son, really looked at him. "Did you know what they were saying about me?" He didn't answer, but his face told me everything. "You did," I said softly. "You knew they thought I was an embarrassment, and you didn't defend me. You let them mock me because you were ashamed of me too." "That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you told them about my accomplishments, about how I raised you alone after your father died, about how I worked 2 jobs to put you through college, about how I've been building a business portfolio for 15 years while they assumed I was just some secretary?" Bradley looked at the floor. "You let them think I was nothing," I said, my voice breaking, "because it was easier than admitting you came from nothing, easier than defending the woman who gave up everything for you." I turned back to the Harrison family. "So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to leave this beautiful wedding that I paid for, and tomorrow morning, I'm going to walk into Harrison Industries as your new CEO, and we're going to have a very different conversation about respect." "Margaret, please," Patricia started. "Save it, Monday morning, 9 o'clock, my office." I looked at Sophia one more time. And you, sweetheart, you might want to practice saying I'm sorry because you just called your husband's mother who paid for your entire wedding a fat old pig in front of 200 witnesses, and she's now your father's boss. I turned and walked out of the Drake Hotel ballroom, out through the lobby, out into the Chicago night. Behind me, I could hear chaos erupting, voices rising, Sophia crying, Patricia's shocked exclamations, James trying to calm everyone down. But I didn't look back. I got in my 10-year-old Honda, drove home to my house in Evanston, and sat in Robert's study with his photograph. I did it, I whispered. I finally did it, controlling interest, just like we always planned. His picture smiled back at me, and for the first time in 19 years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not at table 12, at the head of the table. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in Robert's study until 3 in the morning, going through every document, every financial statement, every piece of evidence that proved I now controlled Harrison Industries, because part of me still couldn't believe it was real. Part of me was still that woman at table 12, watching other people live the life I'd paid for. But the documents didn't lie. 51%. Controlling interest, CEO as of Monday morning. The woman they'd called a pig was now their boss. My phone started ringing around midnight. First Bradley, then James Harrison, then Patricia, then Sophia, then Bradley again, then a number I didn't recognize, then Bradley a third time. I didn't answer any of them. What was there to say? They'd shown me exactly who they were, and I'd shown them exactly who I was. Everything else was just noise. Around 3 a.m., I finally fell asleep in Robert's chair, clutching the stock certificates like a security blanket. I woke up at 6 to my doorbell ringing, and ringing, and ringing. When I looked through the peephole, Bradley was standing on my porch. He looked like he hadn't slept either. His tuxedo was wrinkled, his bow tie undone, his eyes red from crying. I almost didn't open the door. Almost let him stand there ringing the bell until he gave up and left, but he was still my son. That hadn't changed. I opened the door. "Mom," he said, and his voice broke on the word. "Please, please let me explain." I stood aside and let him in. We went to the kitchen, our kitchen, where I'd made him breakfast before school for 12 years, where we'd celebrated his college acceptance, where we'd planned his future. Where everything had gone so wrong. I made coffee, because that's what you do. Crisis or not, you make coffee. Bradley sat at the table with his head in his hands. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "Mom, I'm so sorry." I didn't say anything, I just poured coffee and waited. "I didn't know she was going to say that," he continued. "I swear to God, I had no idea Sophia would." He couldn't even finish the sentence. "And her family, the things they said in the hallway, I didn't hear any of that, I didn't know." "But you knew they looked down on me," I said quietly. "Didn't you?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Yes, and you let them." "Yes." "Why?" Bradley looked up at me with tears streaming down his face. "Because I was ashamed. Not of you, Mom, of me. Of where I came from. Of the fact that I couldn't afford the life Sophia was used to, that her family had to see me as less than them." "So you made me less than them too." "I thought," his voice broke, "I thought if I could just distance myself from our old life, from our middle-class background, from everything that made me different from them, then they'd accept me. Then I'd be good enough for her. And how did that work out?" He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Sophia's father is having a complete breakdown. Her mother won't stop crying. Victoria called me at 2 in the morning screaming about how I destroyed their family. And Sophia," he stopped. "What about Sophia? She's furious at me, at you, at everyone. She said you ambushed us, that you deliberately humiliated her at her own wedding." I took a sip of my coffee. "I didn't say a word until after she called me a pig, Bradley. Everything I did was in response to what she said, what her family said. I know, I told her that, but she's not thinking clearly right now." "What about you?" I looked at my son. "Are you thinking clearly?" "I don't know." He put his head back in his hands. "I don't know anything anymore. Yesterday morning, I thought I was marrying the love of my life. Yesterday afternoon, I thought I was joining this amazing family. Last night, I found out my wife is cruel, her family is horrible, and my mother is secretly a business mogul who's about to destroy them all." "I'm not going to destroy them," He looked up, surprised. You're not. No. I'm going to run the company properly. There's a difference. I sat down across from him. Bradley, I didn't take over Harrison Industries to get revenge on your in-laws. I've been working toward this for 15 years, since before you even met Sophia. This was always the plan, your father's plan. Dad's plan, I nodded. Your father's family were the original partners in Harrison Industries. Did you know that? He shook his head. Robert's grandfather provided the initial capital and land back in 1952, but the Harrisons' grandfather had 51%. When Robert's grandfather died, his shares went to Robert's father. When he died, they came to your dad. 49% minority stakeholder. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at my overgrown garden. Your father spent our entire marriage trying to get to 51%. He wanted controlling interest. He wanted to build Harrison Industries into something amazing, but he died before he could do it. I turned back to Bradley. So I did it for him. I spent 15 years building expertise in commercial real estate, working my way up from secretary to executive assistant at one of Chicago's biggest law firms, learning everything I could about the business. And I bought shares. Every single share that became available, I bought it, quietly, carefully, until finally, 3 weeks ago, I had 51%. And you never told me. No, why not? I sat back down and looked at my son. Because I wanted you to be proud of me for who I was, not what I owned. I wanted you to defend me to the Harrisons because I was your mother and I deserved respect, not because I had power over them. Bradley stared at his coffee. I failed that test, didn't I? Yes. We sat in silence for a while. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, the neighborhood was waking up, birds singing, cars starting, normal people starting normal Sunday mornings. What happens now? Bradley finally asked. Now I go to work tomorrow morning and start running Harrison Industries properly. And Sophia's family? That depends entirely on whether they can do their jobs competently. Mom, please. I know they're awful. I know what they said was unforgivable, but he stopped, struggling with the words. They're my family now, too. Sophia is my wife. If you destroy her father's company, it destroys my marriage. I looked at my son carefully. Do you love her, really love her, or do you love what she represents? He stopped. I don't know anymore. Last night when she said that about you, when everyone laughed, I saw someone I didn't recognize, someone cruel, someone I don't think I like very much. And I don't know if I can forgive that. I don't know if I should forgive that. He looked at me with desperate eyes. What do I do, Mom? And there it was. My son, asking me for advice about the woman who'd called me a pig just hours earlier. Part of me wanted to tell him to divorce her. To walk away from the Harrisons and their cruelty and their condescension, and never look back. But the mother in me, the part that still loved him despite everything, knew that decision had to be his. I can't tell you what to do about your marriage, I said gently. But I can tell you this, the person you marry should make you better, not smaller. They should build you up, not tear down everyone you love to make themselves feel superior. Bradley nodded slowly. Sophia made me feel like I needed to choose between her and you. Between her family's world and our world, like I couldn't have both. And which did you choose? I chose wrong. He was crying again. I chose her world because it felt like moving up, like success, like proving I'd made something of myself. But all I really did was abandon the person who actually loved me. I reached across the table and took his hand. I will always love you, Bradley, no matter what. But I need you to understand something. I'm not going to keep sacrificing myself to make other people comfortable. Not anymore, not even for you. I understand. Do you? Because tomorrow morning, I'm walking into Harrison Industries and I'm going to make changes. Big changes. And some of those changes are going to make your wife's family very unhappy. Can you handle that? Bradley was quiet for a long time. Yes, I think maybe it's time someone held them accountable. They've been coasting for too long. We talked for another hour. About his marriage, about my new role, about what the future might look like. And slowly I started to see glimpses of the son I'd raised. The good man underneath all the insecurity and status seeking. But I also knew that trust, once broken, takes a long time to rebuild. When he finally left around 9 a.m., I sat alone in my kitchen and thought about the day ahead. Tomorrow was Monday. Tomorrow I would walk into Harrison Industries as CEO. Tomorrow the Harrisons would learn what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. Monday morning I woke up at 5 a.m., not because I was nervous, because I was ready. I put on my best suit, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, expensive but not flashy. The pearl earrings Robert gave me for our 20th anniversary. Minimal makeup. Hair pulled back in a simple, professional style. I looked in the mirror and saw a CEO looking back, not Bradley's mother, not Robert's widow, not the woman from table 12. A CEO. I arrived at Harrison Industries at 8:30. The building was a beautiful Art Deco structure in the Loop, one of the crown jewels of the company's portfolio. Prime downtown real estate worth at least $50 million. The security guard didn't recognize me. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Margaret Harrison, CEO, I believe I'm expected. His eyes went wide. "Oh, yes, ma'am, 9th floor executive suite. Mr. Harrison, I mean Mr. James Harrison, he's already up there." I'll bet he is, I thought. The elevator ride gave me time to center myself. I wasn't here for revenge. I wasn't here to humiliate anyone. I was here to do a job. To run a company the way it should have been run for decades. If that made the Harrisons uncomfortable, well, they should have thought of that before calling me a pig. The 9th floor was elegant, thick carpets, original artwork, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. James Harrison's assistant stood up as I approached. "Mrs. Harrison," she said warmly. "I'm Dorothy Mitchell. I'll be supporting you during the transition." I liked her immediately. Professional, competent, no trace of judgment. "Thank you, Dorothy. Is Mr. Harrison in?" "He's in his office. He's been here since 6:30. She lowered her voice. "He's quite anxious to speak with you." "I'm sure he is." James Harrison's office was a corner suite with a view of Lake Michigan. He stood up when I entered, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "Mrs. Harrison, thank you for coming in early." "It's my company now, James. I'll come in whenever I want." I sat down in one of his guest chairs. Technically, this was my office now, but I'd let him keep the illusion of control for a few more minutes. "I want to apologize," he began, "for everything that was said Saturday night. My family's behavior was inexcusable." Yes, it was. Sophia is devastated. She knows what she said was wrong. Patricia and I are horrified. Are you horrified by what she said, James? Or are you horrified that she said it to the woman who now controls your company? He blinked. I both. Of course both. I don't think you would have been horrified if I was still just Bradley's mother, just some middle-class secretary you could laugh about in hallways. That's not fair, isn't it? I pulled out the comprehensive analysis I'd been preparing for months. Let's talk about fairness, James. This company has been underperforming for 7 years. Revenue is flat. Profit margins are declining. Employee retention is 30% below industry standards. I slid the report across his desk. You've been running Harrison Industries like a family piggy bank instead of a real business, charging below-market rents to maintain relationships, paying your relatives excessive salaries for minimal work, letting operating costs balloon while refusing to invest in employee benefits. James flipped through the report, his face getting paler with each page. These numbers are confidential. How did you? I'm the majority shareholder, James. I've had access to everything for years. I just chose not to interfere while I was building my position. I leaned forward. But now I'm CEO, and things are going to change, starting today. What kind of changes? I pulled out another document. First, we're reviewing every rental agreement, bringing them to current market rates. Your tenants have been paying 1990s prices for 2024 premium real estate. But those relationships are costing us millions in lost revenue. This is a business, James, not a charity. I continued. Second, we're restructuring executive compensation. Everyone will be paid based on performance, not family connections. If your son wants to keep his marketing position, he'll need to demonstrate actual results. You can't just fire my son. I'm not firing anyone. Yet, I'm implementing performance standards. If he can meet them, he keeps his job. If he can't, he doesn't. James was turning red now. This is my company. No, James, it's my company. You've been managing it. And based on these results, you've been managing it poorly. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. Third, and this one's non-negotiable, we're implementing comprehensive employee benefits. Healthcare, retirement matching, professional development, starting immediately. That will cost $2 million annually, I know. We can afford it once we stop subsidizing your family's lifestyle. I turned back to face him. Fourth, I'm bringing in an independent auditor to review all financial dealings for the past 10 years. Every expense account, every contract, every dollar that went to family members. An audit, James looked panicked. That's completely unnecessary. Is it? Because I'm curious about some of these expense reports. Your son charged $47,000 to the company last year for client entertainment. That's almost $4,000 a month. I'd like to know which clients he was entertaining and what business resulted from it. Those are legitimate business expenses. Then the audit will confirm that. Shouldn't be a problem. James slumped back in his chair. You're trying to destroy everything my family built. Your family didn't build this company, James. My husband's family did. Your grandfather was the junior partner. You've been managing it, yes, but you've been managing it into the ground. I walked back to his desk and placed both hands on it, leaning in. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to keep your job, for now, as Director of Property Management. You're going to demonstrate actual value to this company, and you're going to start treating employees with respect instead of like servants who should be grateful for whatever scraps you throw them. And if I refuse, then you can join the 7.2 million unemployed Americans looking for work. Your choice. James stared at me with something between fear and fury. This is because of what Sophia said, isn't it? You're punishing my whole family because my daughter made one mistake. I stood up straight. James, I've been planning this takeover for 15 years, since before your daughter was old enough to drink the champagne she used to insult me. Her calling me a pig didn't create this situation. It just accelerated the timeline. Then why? Why now? Because I'm tired, I said simply. Tired of being invisible. Tired of being treated like I'm less than I am. Tired of sacrificing everything while people like you take it for granted. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and James, tell your family that if anyone wants to apologize, they can schedule an appointment through Dorothy. But make sure they understand the difference between apologizing because they're sorry and apologizing because I'm their boss now. How do I tell the difference? I smiled. You can't, but I can. The staff meeting at 10 o'clock was everything I'd hoped for. 25 employees from various departments, all looking nervous and curious. Some had clearly heard about the wedding. Others just knew there was a new CEO who was making changes. I kept my introduction brief. Professional. Good morning. I'm Margaret Harrison, your new CEO. Some of you may have heard about an incident at a family wedding this past Saturday. I want to address that directly. The room went very quiet. On Saturday evening, I was publicly insulted at my son's wedding. Today, I'm your CEO. These are separate things. Whatever personal issues exist between my family and the Harrison family will not affect how I run this company or how I treat employees. I could see shoulders relaxing. People had been worried I was going to bring personal drama into the workplace. What will affect how I run this company is performance. I'm implementing new policies focused on 3 priorities: profitability, employee welfare, and professional excellence. My assistant began distributing the policy documents I'd prepared. You'll notice that health insurance improvements begin immediately. Better coverage, lower premiums, expanded mental health benefits. Retirement matching starts next quarter, 6%, fully vested after 3 years. And we're establishing clear performance metrics for all positions, including executives. A young woman in the back raised her hand. Mrs. Harrison, does that mean family members will actually have to meet the same standards as everyone else? Everyone held their breath. Yes, I said clearly. Everyone in this company, regardless of their last name, will be evaluated on merit and performance, no exceptions. The room erupted in quiet applause, not loud, not showy, but genuine. These people had been waiting years for someone to hold the Harrison family accountable. After the meeting, several employees approached me privately. Mrs. Harrison, we've been asking for better health insurance for 5 years, one woman told me. Mr. Harrison always said it wasn't in the budget. It is now, I assured her. And the performance metrics? A young man asked. Does that apply to Jonathan Harrison? Because he's been collecting a six-figure salary in marketing while the rest of us do the actual work. It applies to everyone, I confirmed. If he can demonstrate value, he'll keep his position. If he can't, he won't. By lunchtime, word had spread through the Chicago business community. Margaret Harrison had taken control of Harrison Industries and was making major changes. My phone started ringing with calls from other CEOs, investors, business associates. Margaret, I heard you finally pulled the trigger, said Tom Chen, CEO of Chen Property Management. How does it feel? Terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, I admitted. Join me for lunch tomorrow. I want to hear everything. And I have some investment opportunities you might find interesting now that you're running a real company instead of watching the Harrisons run it into the ground. This was new. People wanting my input, my expertise, my partnership, not as Bradley's mother, not as someone's widow. As me. At 2 p.m., Dorothy knocked on my office door. I'd taken over the corner office. James had been moved to a smaller suite down the hall. Mrs. Harrison, your son is in the lobby. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent. I considered sending him away, but maternal instinct won again. Send him up. Bradley walked in looking shell-shocked. He stared at the nameplate on my desk, at the photographs I'd already hung, pictures of his father of him as a child of the life we'd built. It's real, he said quietly. You really are CEO. Did you think I was lying? No, he sank into a chair. Sophia's family is in complete meltdown. Her father came home last night and told them you're going to destroy the company. Her mother won't stop crying. Victoria called me this morning screaming about how this is all my fault. How is this your fault? Because I married you into their family, because I brought the enemy right into their house. He looked at me with exhausted eyes. Those were Victoria's exact words, the enemy. And what do you think? I think, he stopped, struggling with the words. I think my wife's family has been running a business into the ground for years, while collecting huge salaries and treating employees like garbage, and I think maybe it's time someone held them accountable. I studied my son carefully. That's not what I asked. I asked what you think about me being CEO. I think I'm proud of you. His voice was quiet but firm. I'm proud that you spent 15 years working toward this. I'm proud that you built something real while everyone underestimated you, and I'm ashamed that I was one of the people underestimating you. We sat in silence for a moment. What about Sophia? I asked. What does she think? Bradley's face twisted. Sophia thinks you deliberately humiliated her at her wedding, that you planned this whole thing to get revenge. And you told her. I told her that you've been working toward this for 15 years, that it had nothing to do with her. That maybe if she hadn't called you a pig in front of 200 people, the transition would have been smoother. How did she take that? She threw a lamp at me. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Is she okay? Physically, yes, emotionally. She's a wreck. Mom, she's crying constantly, not eating, barely sleeping. She knows what she said was wrong. She's horrified by it, but she's also furious that you're punishing her whole family for her mistake. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm running a company. I know that, you know that, but Sophia can't see past her own guilt and embarrassment. Bradley leaned forward. She wants to apologize in person. Will you see her? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Not yet, I said finally. Maybe in a few weeks, once the dust settles. Right now, I need to focus on the company, and she needs to figure out whether she's apologizing because she's actually sorry or because I have power over her family. Bradley nodded slowly. That's fair. We talked for another 30 minutes about the changes I was implementing, about his job. He'd been working at a consulting firm but wasn't happy, about what the future might look like. Can I ask you something? Bradley said as he was leaving. Why didn't you ever tell me? About the shares, about building toward this. I walked to the window overlooking Lake Michigan. Because I wanted you to be proud of me for who I was, not what I owned. I wanted you to value me as your mother, not as someone with power and money. And I failed that test. Yes, but you're starting to understand why. That's progress. After he left, I spent the rest of the afternoon in meetings, with the CFO reviewing financial statements, with the legal team discussing the upcoming audit, with HR implementing the new benefits package. By 6 p.m., I was exhausted but exhilarated. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Harrison, this is Patricia. Please, we need to talk. Can we meet for coffee, just the two of us?" I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "I'm very busy this week. Perhaps in 2 weeks, I'll have my assistant reach out to schedule something." Her response was immediate. "Thank you. Margaret, I'm so deeply sorry for everything. I hope you can forgive us." I didn't respond to that, because I didn't know if I could forgive them, and I wasn't ready to make that decision yet. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. I restructured 3 departments, eliminated 2 redundant positions, both held by Harrison family members who'd been collecting salaries for doing essentially nothing, renegotiated 5 major lease agreements, bringing in an additional $3.2 million in annual revenue. The audit began. And almost immediately, it uncovered problems. James Harrison's expense accounts showed tens of thousands of dollars in questionable charges. Client dinners at restaurants where no clients could be identified. Business travel to golf resorts during periods when no business was conducted. Professional development charges for country club memberships. His son Jonathan was even worse. $47,000 in annual expenses with almost nothing to show for it. When questioned, he couldn't name a single client he'd brought to the company in the past 2 years. I called them both into my office on a Friday afternoon. "Gentlemen," I said, sliding the audit reports across my desk, "we need to discuss these findings." Jonathan turned white. James turned red. "Those expenses are all legitimate," James started. "Really? Because the auditors can't find any evidence of business outcomes from these expenditures. No new clients, no new contracts, no measurable results. Building relationships takes time. 7 years, James. You've been charging the company for relationship building for 7 years with no results." Jonathan jumped in, defensive. "This is ridiculous. You can't expect us to prove the value of every business dinner." "Yes, I can, and I do. That's how real businesses work." I stood up and walked to the window. "Here's what's going to happen. Jonathan, your position is being eliminated effective immediately. The marketing function will be handled by an external firm that can actually demonstrate results." "You can't fire me." Jonathan stood up, furious. "I'm family. You're an employee, and you're terminated for cause. Failure to perform job duties and misuse of company funds." I turned to James. "You're being placed on probationary status, 90 days to demonstrate measurable value to the organization. If you can't, you'll be reassigned to a different role or terminated." James's face went from red to purple. "This is because of what happened at the wedding. You're destroying my family for revenge." "No, James, I'm running a company properly for the first time in decades. If your family can't meet professional standards, that's not my fault." Jonathan stormed out, slamming the door behind him. James stayed, looking defeated. "Please," he said quietly, "my son needs this job. He has student loans, credit card debt. Then perhaps he should have actually done the work he was being paid for. He's young, he'll learn." He had 2 years to learn. He chose to play golf instead. I sat back down. "James, I'm not trying to destroy your family. But I'm also not going to enable incompetence because of sentiment. Harrison Industries is a business, not a welfare program for your relatives." He left without another word. That evening, my phone exploded with calls and texts. Jonathan, furious and threatening legal action. Victoria, crying and begging me to reconsider. Patricia, asking for mercy. Even Sophia texting, "Please stop destroying my family." I blocked them all except Patricia's number. Her I responded to. "I'm not destroying anything. I'm requiring competence. If your family views that as destruction, that tells you everything you need to know about how they've been operating." But the text that surprised me came from Bradley. "Mom, I heard about Jonathan. Thank you for having the courage to do what needed to be done. I'm proud of you." I stared at that message for a long time. My son was proud of me, not for being generous, not for being accommodating, for being strong. 3 weeks after the wedding, Sophia called and asked to meet me for coffee. Not through her parents, not with Bradley present, just her, asking directly. I agreed. partly because I was curious, partly because I thought she might have actually learned something. We met at a quiet cafe in Lincoln Park on a Saturday morning. Sophia arrived looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. No designer armor, just jeans, a sweater, minimal makeup. She looked young, vulnerable, human. "Mrs. Harrison," she said, sitting down. "Thank you for agreeing to see me. Call me Margaret," she nodded, tears already forming. "I've rehearsed this 1,000 times, but now that I'm here, I don't know where to start. Start with the truth." Sophia took a shaky breath. "The truth is I was terrified of you. Bradley talked about you constantly. How strong you were. How you'd survived losing his father. How you'd built a career while raising him alone. And I felt like I could never measure up to the woman who'd been his whole world. I hadn't expected that. So when we got engaged," she continued, "I started looking for reasons to see you as less than you were. I told myself you were too involved, too controlling. Because if you weren't perfect, I didn't have to feel inadequate." She wiped her eyes. "And at the wedding, I'd had too much champagne and I wanted my family to laugh. I wanted them to see me as clever. So I said the cruelest thing I could think of about the woman who'd paid for my entire wedding." "Why pig?" Sophia looked down. "Because my mother had commented that you'd lost weight since the engagement, and my sister made a joke about you stress eating, and I just took their casual cruelty and made it worse." The honesty was brutal. But it was honest. "I can't take it back," she said. "I can't undo what I said, but I can tell you that I've learned something these past 3 weeks. Watching you take over the company, seeing how you treat people with respect while demanding excellence, you're everything I wish I was." "Sophia, I mean it. You don't perform strength, you have it. And I'm so sorry I couldn't see that until you had power over my family." I took a sip of my coffee, considering her words. "Can I tell you something?" I said finally. "Your apology means more now than it would have right after the wedding." She looked confused. "Because now you've had time to think, to understand. You're not just apologizing because you got caught or because I'm your father's boss. You're apologizing because you understand what you did wrong." Sophia started crying harder. "Does this mean can we try again? As family?" I thought about it, really thought about it, on one condition. "Anything. No more pretending." "Not with me. Not with Bradley. Not with each other. The image you were both projecting, wealthy, sophisticated, perfect, it's exhausting. I'd rather have an honest relationship with complicated people than a polite relationship with performers." "I can do that." She reached across the table. "Margaret, I know I don't deserve it, but thank you for giving me another chance." We talked for another hour. About her childhood, about the pressure of the Harrison name, about her fears of not being enough. And slowly, I started to see past the cruel woman from the wedding to the insecure girl underneath. She wasn't evil, just young, just thoughtless, just someone who'd never faced real consequences before. "What about your family?" I asked as we were leaving. "Your father, your mother, your siblings?" Sophia's face darkened. "They're struggling. Jonathan is furious about being fired. My parents are panicking about the audit findings. Victoria keeps saying you're trying to destroy us." "And what do you say?" I say maybe we needed to be destroyed a little bit. We've been coasting for too long. Taking things for granted. Treating people badly because we never thought there would be consequences." She looked at me seriously. "You're not destroying my family, Margaret. You're holding us accountable. There's a difference." 6 months later, I stood in the Harrison Industries boardroom presenting quarterly results. "Revenue is up 42% compared to this time last year," I reported to the board. "Employee satisfaction scores have increased 58%. We've successfully renegotiated 85% of our existing leases and attracted 7 new major tenants to our properties." The board members were smiling. Even the ones who'd been skeptical about my leadership were impressed. After the meeting, Tom Chen pulled me aside. "Margaret, you've done in 6 months what should have taken 3 years. The business community is taking notice." "I'm just running things properly," I said. "Exactly, which is revolutionary in a company that's been coasting on legacy for decades." That evening, I had dinner with Bradley and Sophia at their apartment. They'd moved into a place they could actually afford on Bradley's new salary. He'd left the consulting firm to take a position at Chen Property Management. Sophia had started working too, in fundraising for a nonprofit. They were building a real life based on what they earned, not what they inherited. Over homemade lasagna, they told me their news: Sophia was pregnant, 3 months along. "We wanted you to be the first to know," Bradley said, taking my hand, "before anyone else, before Sophia's parents." I felt tears spring to my eyes. "I'm going to be a grandmother. If you'll have us," Sophia said quietly. "I know we've made terrible mistakes." "Everyone makes mistakes," I interrupted. "What matters is learning from them." Later, as we looked at ultrasound pictures, Sophia asked me about Robert. I told her about our early years, about building a business together, about his dreams for Harrison Industries, about losing him too young and having to figure out how to keep going alone. "You never remarried?" she asked. "Never found the right person?" I was too busy building a legacy to worry about romance. "Do you regret it?" I thought about it honestly. "Sometimes, but mostly I'm grateful. I built something real, something that matters, something my husband would be proud of." As I drove home that night, I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, the woman at table 12. The woman they'd called a pig. That woman had been invisible, diminished, afraid to claim her own power. The woman I was now, CEO, grandmother-to-be, woman who'd finally stopped apologizing for taking up space. She wasn't perfect. She was still learning, still making mistakes. But she was real. And she was respected, not because of what she could give people, because of who she'd become. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Harrison. "Margaret, thank you for having coffee with me today. Your advice about James's career path was invaluable. You've been more generous to our family than we deserved." I smiled and texted back, "We're family now." That's what family does. Because that was the thing about power. Real power wasn't about destroying people. It was about deciding who deserved your grace and who needed to earn it. The Harrisons had spent 6 months earning it. Slowly. Painfully. Honestly. James had moved into a smaller role focused on client relationships, the one thing he was actually good at. He'd taken a pay cut, accepted accountability, and was rebuilding his reputation one honest interaction at a time. Patricia had joined the company's new community outreach program, using her society connections for actual good instead of just status. Jonathan had found work at a marketing firm where he had to prove his value daily. No family connections to coast on, just results. And Victoria had apologized, really apologized, in a letter that took her 3 weeks to write. They weren't perfect, but they were trying, and that was enough. I pulled into my driveway in Evanston, the same house I'd lived in for 28 years. But I'd finally fixed those kitchen countertops, and the garden, and the roof, because I wasn't saving every penny for someone else's dream anymore. I was living my own. Inside, I sat in Robert's study and looked at his photograph. "We did it," I whispered. "Controlling interest, CEO, everything we planned, everything you dreamed of." His picture smiled back at me, and for the first time in 19 years, I felt complete, not because I'd found romance or because my family was perfect, but because I'd finally become the woman I was always meant to be. Not the woman at table 12, not the fat old pig, just Margaret Harrison, CEO, mother, grandmother-to-be. Woman who'd learned that the only person's permission you need to be powerful is your own.